Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're going to be talking about the upcoming Netflix series Jupiter's Legacy and what you need to do to prepare for it. Or even if you're curious about what is Jupiter's Legacy, we're going to tell you all about that right here. Hey everybody, before we get started about Jupiter's Legacy, let me take a moment to remind you to subscribe. It helps the channel grow and helps the metrics and helps us cover more things. Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today I'm going to give you the inside track on the upcoming Netflix series Jupiter's Legacy. What is Jupiter's Legacy, Brent? We saw a quick teaser, and then we saw something, and it's based on a comic book. I've never heard of it. What is it? Well, here I am to tell you all about it. Now, a little preface, this thing comes out in June, so you can have plenty of time to read Jupiter's Legacy if you want to. If you don't and you want to go in cold, that's great too. But at least let me tell you a little bit about it and what it's about, because I think you might be interested in it if you like anything on this channel, or you might be wanting to show somebody who maybe likes a little bit of superheroes, maybe likes a little bit of family drama. They will probably like Jupiter's Legacy as well, if it turns out to be a good show, right? That's always the caveat. I'm not a predictor. I haven't seen anything more than you have at this point, and it's March. I've seen a teaser with the title sequence and a couple of images and a little bit more than that that's been released on the internet. But what I have done is read all of the comic books so far released for Jupiter's Legacy. So let's talk about that and what it tells us about what the series may be about. So Jupiter's Legacy is a comic book series by Mark Millar and Frank Quitely. There's a second comic book series which originally came out as Jupiter's Circle by Mark Millar and Wilfredo Torres, Chris Sprouse providing some of the art in some of those issues, and that is a prequel to Jupiter's Legacy. Last year, in 2020, after Netflix bought the Millar World company or platform that was publishing through Image Comics. I don't know how they publish exactly now. I think they self-publish as Millar World. But anyway, they bought all of Mark Millar's properties and stuff that he was developing and had done comic books for that hadn't been developed at that time. So Kick-Ass is not included in here. Some other things are not included. Wanted, things like that. They reside with the companies that they came out in. But Jupiter's Legacy is the first, I think it's the first Millar World thing to come out of Netflix. So Mark Millar was and is a very good comic book writer. The thing he's probably most known for right now is writing the Civil War comic book series for Marvel, where he pit Captain America versus Iron Man over superhero registration and inspired Captain America 3 Civil War, and many, many books after that. He's done a long run on Ultimate X-Men, which kind of launched his career back in the early 2000s. Prior to that, he worked with Frank Quitely for the first time on The Authority. So he's kind of known as this edgy comic book writer. He's trying to subvert storylines and subvert action and subvert the types of violence that you're used to seeing in comic books. You might have seen the Kick-Ass movies. If you have, those are based on Mark Millar's comic books. There's 4 of those. There's 4 with Dave Lazowski or whatever, and then there's more after that. But the 4 ones you should read are Kick-Ass, Kick-Ass 2, Prelude, Hit Girl, Kick-Ass 2, and Kick-Ass 3. So those are the 4 that I recommend. They're all drawn by John Romita Jr. There's another one where there's a new Kick-Ass as a black woman. I think Mark Millar and John Romita Jr. did that first volume, and then they both left the series to other writers and artists as well. Can't recommend that as I haven't read it. So check it. The first 4 out I think are worthwhile. But anyway, Netflix bought his company, so they renumbered the Jupiter's Legacy trade paperbacks. So it's a little bit more confusing. So if you go on Comixology right now, or you're in the stores or Barnes & Noble and you see Jupiter's Legacy, you're going to see them listed as Volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, I'm here to give you the bad news that is not Volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can start reading Volume 1 and read Volume 2. So what Volumes 1 and 2 are numbered as now are the Jupiter's Circle Preludes with the Wilfredo Torres art. So those are about the past lives of the Utopian and Miss America or whatever her name is, things like that. The mom and dad of this superhero family that we're going to follow in Jupiter's Legacy. It's about them in the early days having their powers in the 30s and 40s and 50s going into the 60s. What you really need to read for preparation of the Netflix series, I think, is just stick to the 2 volumes that have Frank Quitely art. And these are Jupiter's Legacy Volume 1 and 2 as originally published, or on the trade paperbacks now, they're listed as Volume 3 and Volume 4. There is another volume coming out. It's called Jupiter's Requiem. It does not have Frank Quitely art, which is a little bit disappointing for me. I don't know what he's doing. He's kind of like... he's not as prolific as he once was, so he likes to take his time. And the nice thing about these Jupiter's Legacy books is that he did take his time. And it is on par with anything he has ever done in We 3, Batman and Robin, and especially All-Star Superman. This is top-notch Frank Quitely art. That is to say, if you're a Frank Quitely fan, there's some people who think he draws people a little ugly. He's definitely got his own style. I think his women turn out beautiful. His men, they're a little more like grimacing and gruff and rough, instead of like the superhero like Jim Lee you see behind me, where everybody's like super chiseled, right? So Frank Quitely maybe makes men look a little bit more like Frank Millar does than he does his women, and that's okay. But that is to say, every artist has their own style, and whether you like it or not is all up to your artistic preferences. Me, I love Frank Quitely. I think he's super detailed, super simple. His storytelling is really good, and there's moments in here, in between the panels, that because of the way he frames things, that really help the storytelling. There's a really famous page from All-Star Superman #1 with Grant Morrison was doing the writing on that, so it's also a credit to him. But basically, they gave Superman's origin in 4 panels, him and Frank Quitely. And Frank Quitely delivered it perfectly. Similar things in here with Jupiter's Legacy, where he's doing stuff that you've seen before. Like he's breaking through panels and doing cutaways of walls so that you can see all the damage as the superhero fights go through the buildings and stuff like that. We've seen it before in All-Star Superman, but he's using it to a very good level here as well. So I appreciate that level of detail that he's pouring into this book. So that's what you need to read if you want to get a head start on the Netflix series. Jupiter's Legacy, Volume 3 or 4 if it's a newer collection. If it's an older one, just make sure it'll say Volume 1 or 2. All you gotta do is make sure that it has Frank Quitely art and it looks like the characters on the covers the same way it does on the inside, because he did provide the trade paperback covers for the newer versions of Volume 1 and 2, even though the interior art is totally different. So if you get a book, the insides match the cover, you're good to go. Read those two. And I think you're going to get the complete story. What I'm interested to find out is how far this first season of Jupiter's Legacy goes. We have some bigger characters, actors. You got Josh Duhamel, Leslie Bibb, and you go, Brent, Josh Duhamel? Yes, Josh Duhamel, he's a good actor. Yeah, he's done the Transformers movies, and I don't fault him for that. Everybody needs a good paycheck. They probably raised his namesake a couple of times because they were in really big, successful movies. But if you've seen any of his chick flick stuff, he's a pretty good actor. I think he can pull this off. He's an interesting actor for me. Leslie Bibb, kind of an underrated actress. You might remember her from Iron Man 1. She was the reporter person that Tony was interacting with and love interest in the early beginning, and then kind of turned on him. She was on this TV show Popular. She's had a number of smaller roles, but I also think she's a good actress, so I'm interested to see what they do here. That being said, they're kind of done with very quickly in the first volume of the Frank Quitely Jupiter's Legacy. Like, issue 3, they kind of are done. So I'm interested to see how long they're going to stretch this out, and if they're going to turn this, like, basically each Jupiter's Legacy volume is 5 or 6 issues. So you're talking about 10 or 12 issues of story, because it's really one story. Like, where volume 1 ends, or volume 3, if you want to call it now, I'm going to call it volume 1, because that's how I originally bought them, and that's how they look like in my Comixology when I read them again. It's kind of a big cliff. It's a resolution and a cliffhanger. It's something that leaves you wanting more and interested to see where the story goes. And volume 2 picks up right where that left off and continues until the real resolution of this entire story. So I say that to say these are two bigger actors, and I'm interested to see if they stick around the whole season, if they change things, or if they're going to stretch out the seasons to where you're going to get 4 or 5 seasons that cover the entire arc of these 2 trade paperbacks, and they're going to insert more stories. I kind of hope that's the case, because there's not a whole lot of the Utopian and his wife in here in the first 2 volumes to really get you to like those characters or really hate them either. Certainly, I read, so in preparation for this video, I read all 4 volumes, the prequels and the Frank Quitely stuff. And the Utopian in there, and it's good background for the older hero characters, of which in the Frank Quitely stuff, you really only see 4 of them. Utopian, his wife, Sky Fox, and I want to say it's Mentalo, but that's wrong. It's something else. Utopian's brother. So you don't really meet everybody else on that old school superhero team until you read the Wilfredo Torres, the prequel volumes. Wilfredo Torres does most of the art in those. So I'm interested to see if they're going to do a lot of flashbacks, maybe, and kind of do dual timelines and kind of stretch this out. That's kind of what I would do. So that way, when, these characters have to leave and go to their natural conclusion, there's more of an emotional impact because you've gotten to know them, to love them, to hate them, or really understand why they're doing it, what they're doing. So I've talked around the plot of this enough. So what is the plot, Brent? Get to the point. Well, Jupiter's Legacy is basically it's a family superhero drama with a whole lot of action. You have these 2 superheroes, this family of superheroes, husband, wife, and brother, that have been around since the 40s, and they've had superpowers. They encountered this weird little island or something that gave them superpowers, and they decided to use them for good in the way that Superman did in the 40s comics, right? So they're constantly saving people. They try to be apolitical. They don't want to get involved in the politics of the world. They're just there to help people. And as the world gets more complicated, the way that it did, in modern times, like if you looked at the 1940s, we were not as divided as a country. And now we're super divided along stupid stuff half the time. Wear a mask. It's science. It's not politics. But I say that to say that the argument amongst the older superheroes and the newer ones is evolving and changing to make points that they should get more involved in politics. They should take a stand. They should have an opinion instead of just showing up when people need help physically. They have super smart brains, some of these superheroes. So why shouldn't they go and tackle the problems of the economy or go tackle the problems of poverty in America, that sort of thing, or even the entire world? Whereas meanwhile, the older superheroes are saying, no, we shouldn't interfere in humans because we're not above them, we're with them, right? We are one of them, we're not above them. And the younger superheroes, the newer generation, are all, as there become more and more and more of them, as these guys kind of populate the earth, are kind of like, nah, man, we're not one of them. They're sitting in VIP clubs. It's almost like if you took Superman from the 40s and kept him aging throughout the decades, and then you gave him a kid during the 70s and 80s, and then injected that kid into the late 90s, early 2000s celebrity culture of Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and even took that further into the influencer culture, because they're talking about contracts here with branding deals and stuff like that, to where the newer, younger heroes, per se, the children of the originals, are more interested about developing their brands and developing their empires and doing things like that than they are to use their superpowers to go and help people. A couple of them just show up to these emergencies that they get called on, and they sit by the wayside or say that they're having problems with their powers, and that's why they're not in there in the middle of the battle. Meanwhile, old grandpa over here, the Utopian, who's got white hair and a beard at this point, he's 90 years old, but probably looks like he's late 50s, early 60s, is going, that's BS. I know, I can hear your powers working. The Utopian's basically an all-powerful Superman. Half of these characters, I don't know if this is going to change in the television series or not, all have flight, super strength, and some sort of psychic powers or telekinesis. And it's not really defined in the book how many powers most of these characters have. It's just to say that a lot of them have similar powers, and some of them differ. Some of them maybe more specialize in one thing than the other. So it's not exactly like Marvel, where you may have one power set. Like we're watching WandaVision, and Monica Rambeau seems to have light powers, even though we haven't really figured that out yet. Wanda has magic powers, so whatever she can do with magic, she can do. Captain America Steve Rogers has enhanced strength and flexibility, but he can't fly. That sort of thing. Liver's like a more limited power set. In Mark Millar's universe, he's like, let's go nuts. Give everybody as much powers as they want, because that's kind of where you would expect to see superheroes that were granted powers anyway. So how do they get these powers? Well, they go to this mysterious island. The utopian Mr. Samson is having dreams back in like the late 1930s. He hires a crew. He takes his friends to the island. They go in some temple in this island, and they meet these aliens who apparently give them powers, and that's it. That's all you hear about it. So I hope that's explored more in maybe a future volume, this Jupiter's Requiem that we're getting, as well as in the television series, to kind of flesh that out a little bit more. I think that's stuff that you can easily write into a good like origin episode or a series of flashbacks throughout the series. So I'm excited to see that stuff. But really the main conflict of Jupiter's Legacy is between this older generation of superheroes and this younger one. And even between the older generation, not all of them think the same. Some think we should interfere. And it's that conflict between the older generation, who's kind of and the guy that disagrees, the uncle, aligning themselves with the younger one, and then kind of manipulating these young, dumb superhero children of theirs to go along with him, to take advantage of power and take advantage of the celebrity culture and things like that. And that's where the conflict relies. And Mark Millar, as much as he tries to subvert superhero genres as making them really violent, really grim, really dark sometimes, he also likes to inject them with a lot of humor, with a lot of fun, and a very big, like, not relevance, but, beholding to the ideas of what superheroes should be. He's always trying to bring them back to where they were in the 60s, this kind of like ideal version of a superhero where, they're around to help people. Like, he loves that idea of superheroes being around to help people, not necessarily just being there to beat up on people. So he will use the edginess, he will use the violence, he will use the modern storytelling to try and bring them back to what he thinks that they should be. But in a modern storytelling sense. And I think that's what's strongest about Mark Millar's writing, is that he has this reverence. That's the word I'm looking for. This reverence for these classic superhero stories and archetypes, but he uses modern storytelling to bring them back full circle. It's kind of something that Zack Snyder didn't do with Man of Steel or Batman v Superman. We will see with this director's cut of Justice League. But he didn't do that per se because he's taking them fully modern, and he doesn't have that reverence for the idealized version of these characters, or at least not within his films. Maybe as a person, but he doesn't want to tell those stories. Mark Millar wants to tell those stories, but realizes he needs to tell them in an engaging way. And that is what he ultimately does here in Jupiter's Legacy in the comic books. So I'm hoping that the television series retains a lot of that. So, there you have it. That's what Jupiter's Legacy is all about. Should you read the Frank Quitely volumes? Absolutely. I think they are great reads, and you should definitely check them out. Do you need to read the prequels? I don't really think so, unless they start developing these past characters like Blue Bolt and I forget the guy in the yellow outfit. He's kind of like the Flash, the Flare, I think he's called. They're pretty much only in the volumes 1 and 2 of the newly collected editions, what was originally called Jupiter's Circle. They're kind of only appearing in there, so unless they're going to drag them forward into the Netflix series, they don't really appear in the modern stuff. It's not really clear what happened to them. But Mark Millar does do a good job of, like, Blue Bolt is gay, so he's kind of dealing with being gay in the 30s and 40s and living a very, very closeted lifestyle. And then, eventually he starts to have, like, he comes in contact with Hoover, for the FBI director, who's threatening him of blackmail. There's a great storyline there. You also have the Flare, who is, not aging per se, but his wife is aging. He's, tries to leave his wife for this younger model who's interested in superheroics, and then realizes that the people who really love him are the ones who age with him. And you also see like the clashes with his children and how that affects their children as well, because their dad is out gallivanting around on television and newsreels with the woman he left their mother for, and it's kind of offensive to the young children. They're old enough to know that that's rude and that's wrong, right, Dad? So that is a very cool storyline, but they're all kind of like self-contained. They don't really flow into the Frank Quitely stuff. The Frank Quitely stuff stands on its own as Volume 1, Volume 2, or Volume 3 and 4, or whatever. Like, it's its own thing, and I think that's where you should start. If you really enjoy that stuff and want to know more about the Utopian and this older team of superheroes that you don't really get to know, per se, jump into the Volumes 1 and 2 of the recollected stuff, the Jupiter Circle volumes. I think that's worth your time. The art is also retro, per se. They're simplified, as you might call it. It harkens back to the simple, style of the 50s and 60s. It's more like Chris Samney, who is a current artist working with Robert Kirkman on Firepower. He did some Daredevil stuff with Mark Waid. So if you like that sort of style, Wilfredo Torres will fit that. It's not Frank Quitely trying to tell these stories set in the 30s, okay? Even though Frank Quitely can still do retro. He can do that all on his own. But anyway, that's my primer on Jupiter's Legacy. I hope that it's good when it comes out on Netflix this June. And let me know down below if you guys have read these books or if you're excited to see Jupiter's Legacy and see what else Mark Millar develops for Netflix. Because he's got a lot of other series with a lot of other cool ideas. And, I hope that it leads to more great content for Netflix. Because the streaming wars are on, people. And they're going to try and pull out as many rabbits out of hats as much as possible. So they're going to try a whole lot of stuff here. And if Mark Millar's behind a lot of the Netflix stuff, I think he's a smart writer and a little bit of edgy. And it has that modern flair that I really like sometimes with the humor. I'm down for it. So let's find out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, share down below. Let me know what you guys think. And we will see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.